everyone, and welcome to another episode of Page Turners Plus. As promised from our last episode, today we'll be reflecting on Andie Davis's Let Me Liberate You. To tell you a bit more about the novel and Andie Davis, we have Paula. Paula?
Thank you, Roger. As today is the first recording that we're doing in August when we celebrate emancipation, and 2nd August 2024 was the centenary of the birth of James Baldwin, it feels right that the title of the book we're discussing today is Let Me Liberate You. The author of the novel is Andie Davis, who was born in Montserrat and raised in Barbados. Let Me Liberate You is her first novel. It was published only a month ago on 9th July 2024. The novel is an exploration of class and color dynamics in Barbados and an inquiry into the nature and complexity of allyship. The main protagonist is Sabri Cumberbatch, a young photographer and a darling of the art scene in New York City, where she was raised since the age of 9. Struggling with imposter syndrome and a general sense of displacement, she believes she will find her feet if she returns to Barbados where she was born, but hasn't visited in 20 years. As soon as she returns, she's confronted by Bajan classism. She becomes an accidental activist, campaigning to liberate, as she sees them, the oppressed workers of Barbados. But because Sabri Cumberbatch is a Yankee Bajan puppy show, what ensues is chaotic and hilarious.
Thank you, Paula. I guess we could jump in because Paula's synopsis was quite hilarious. So, do you know any of the characters? Kesua?
Yeah. I'm gonna get her name wrong now. But the Aggie Toppins housemaid, Iselda. She is a really familiar character. She reminded me a lot of my grandmother, which I have things to say about Bajan novels. There's a character that reminds me of my grandmother, but no, but she really does, and I think she's extremely well drawn. And we've all met that person who is not interested in the liberation of the people. They're not interested. They're busy with their day-to-day work. They work hard. They work very hard. They work very hard, and everybody else should work hard too, and stop putting things in their minds about other things. You know, that they're kind of really, I'm describing it really badly, but it's just this image of somebody who should be in some ways the poster child for exploitation, right? And that's certainly how she's seen by our main protagonist, but is the least interested in some ways. You know, the title's almost for her, isn't it? Let Me Liberate You is directed at her. She's the character that needs liberating, and she is the least interested in liberation for anybody, let alone herself. You know, she's got a good job. She's very grateful for her good job, and if she plays her cards right, she'll have that good job until she doesn't need it anymore. You know, and this young person is coming to wreck her, and that's a very familiar character, right? Someone who's happy with the status quo insofar as they're making it as much as they ever expect to make it. It's a tragic character in lots of ways, but extremely well drawn.
I want to fight you on this. How in heaven's name is Isilda a tragic character? Isilda knows what she's about. The Sabri is as we would say in Jamaica, she rank and feisty. Don't know her hair from her tail, and want to come to say she liberating this big woman who knows exactly what she's about. And I think that's it. I think that's the point the novel is making. But on the point of are these characters familiar? Every single one of them was. I knew every main character. This is the most Caribbean. This has to be the most Caribbean novel we've ever read because I knew these people so well.
I'll take back my tragic character. I think I don't think this character is tragic. I think that what she's drawing on. I think the author is trying to say is like it's kind of tragic how the person that. Anyway, let me do it. Yeah, I'm gonna shut up now because I'm expressing myself. I don't have to get better. I'll come back to this, I'm sure.
I just wanted to agree that yes, I definitely recognized like everybody in the book, you know, the ones who are like, yeah, we're allies, the upper class Asians, the workers, like yeah, like could see them all. I could picture them all. I've met them all. I've lived, gone to school with, and worked with all of them. So yeah.
And one of the great things too about this novel is all the last names were so quintessentially Bajan. Toppin, Cumberbatch, Gibbons. Every single last name was those of us who know Barbados. Those are just very Bajan names. Absolutely easy to identify.
I definitely agree. This was a very Bayesian novel. But I want to say that if Tony were here, Tony would definitely be speaking about Sabri as a character that he knows, because in almost every episode he speaks about the expats who suddenly reappear with with knowledge of everything, with all the with all the knowledge to solve all our problems. And in a way, that was Savory. And I know so many Savories, but also know so many Aggies as well.
Mm.
Kesua, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I love Sabri as a character because I think what the author does brilliantly, I think, is point out that, like, as much as she's cynical about the New York art world, right? When we meet her, she's still in New York. You know, she's still very, very cynical, and whilst being successful, right? She can see through the kind of the kind of shallow trendiness, the kind of she and she describes it very, very clearly for us. Yet she's unable to be as incisive and familiar with the same sorts of dynamics in her home country, right? And I think that's what makes her a little bit different from those other expats, because she doesn't come in just silly about stuff. She's very smart in some ways, but she's uninformed because she's an outsider in a different way. And I think that's really interesting that she explores that complexity, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So the three main protagonists of the novel, Sabri, Isilda, and Aggie, while all three of them are portrayed as flawed, Aggie seems to be treated less sympathetically than the other two women. Do you agree? And if so, did that seem fair to you? I mean, Aggie was probably the one easiest to hate, but I'd like to hear what others have to say.
Yeah, yes, I agree with the statement that Aggie was treated less sympathetically. Um, However, I don't know that it was unfair. Some people need to be treated less sympathetically. I don't see that Aggie did anything that should arouse sympathetic feelings. She was not a monster, certainly not, but she was shallow, self-serving, even towards her husband, who absolutely adored her. She was looking out for number one. What pleased her was what was important. So yeah, I agree that she she did come across more one dimensional than the other two main protagonists. But then some people aren't very deep.
Yeah, and I also have to say though, she kind of got not necessarily redemption, but I thought she was things worked out nicely for her. And I mean, in the end, when you think about the relation in terms of the relationships specifically with her daughter and her niece, like, so yeah, I think she did get some good treatment as well.
But I
And I
think
think
everybody, sorry, I think everybody, this was a happily ever after story.
Right,
mm.
I think everybody turned out well.
right.
And also I think even her when she was even in that kind of less fully fleshed out, less sympathetic character. And I think Paula's right. She's less fully fleshed out because there's less to her. But the author's very clear about that, I think, as well, right? She marries very young. She's prepared for marriage. She marries, and it's much later in life that she realizes that her life has been empty, and builds a career for herself. So in some ways, I actually think it's very sympathetic towards her because she's not just some kind of home wrecking evil person. She's got a backstory as to why she is the way she is. She's unfulfilled in her marriage, and so seeks out love elsewhere. And I think that's actually quite nice. Nice is a terrible word. I
But
appreciate.
Clive, she's not unfulfilled. Clive is a good, dutiful husband who absolutely adores her. I agree with you that the way her father raised them, the father raised them for upward mobility through marriage, and that is a handicap. But I don't know that she suffered too much. She's the one who married best among her sisters.
Mm.
True. And just to
Unfulfilled,
speak a bit,
perhaps unfulfilled physically, right? So there's a lack of connection there in her marriage, I think.
right. I was gonna say though, just to speak about with regards to what Kessa was saying about the way she was raised, and remember she was also different from her three sisters. It was the three sisters, the great the swans, the three swans, and then there was her. So I guess she was the ugly duckling, I assume.
No,
No,
no, they were all
no,
swans. They were
they were
all
all
swans.
swans.
She was the baby.
I
She
got the
was,
impression she was maybe the youngest. Like
yes,
maybe the
she
three
was
of them
Okay,
were
the
quite
baby.
similar
I
in age,
got
and
the
she was a few
sorry,
years
I
younger.
thought that I guess I interpreted it differently that there were the three swans and then there was her, but I didn't. Yeah, okay. That was a misreading on my part. Okay.
But then I wanted to throw out Isilda because no one's mentioned Isilda. I just thought Isilda was a product of a very colonial classist society. I didn't necessarily see it as flawed. I mean, maybe on the face of it, yes, flawed. Um, in terms of her defiance, if you want to call it that. If you want to call it defiance in the face of Sabre's indiscretion, feisty, and behavior, as as Paula called it. But I don't know if I could fault her for the way she was portrayed in the novel. I don't know what any of you think.
I, I thought of her as flawed in that she was just impatient with other views. Um, you know, so I loved Isilda. Isilda is my heroine, but just Isilda didn't want to listen to anybody else. What Isilda said was the truth and the only truth. So in that way, I conceived her as flawed.
Right, especially with regards to her son. Like she was not interested in seeing any good in him whatsoever. She made up her mind what he was, and that was it. So yeah, I
And
agree.
then to address like some of the serious issues that came across in the novel. So you had human trafficking, social inequality, and worker oppression. But because it is fast, some of the characters and situations are necessarily ridiculous. Is there a danger of trivializing those issues by approaching them the way the novel does? I'm going to stay quiet here for a bit. I want to hear everyone else first.
I
I
think
don't know. I didn't feel that it was being trivialized. I felt that it was being shown up for how, in some instances, how ridiculous some of these things really are in actual fact. And I feel like just because knowing the kind of people we are in the Caribbean, like we love to make jokes about stuff, and that's a way to get us interested in a topic. We laugh about it, but it's kind of helping us to approach the topic in our own uniquely Caribbean way. I didn't feel like anything was trivialized. I felt like she laid bare quite a lot of things that people should actually take seriously.
Yeah, I just thought it was brilliant satire. I think not every novel has to be written in earnest. It's a skill to write satire, and I think Andie Davis has done a brilliant job with this. And we need more satire in the Caribbean, right? Caribbean fiction can come in all forms and shapes. We've delved this year a few times into what's the word I'm looking for? Speculative fiction. Satire is now joining. I'm here for it. Loved it.
I absolutely loved it. I didn't think it trivialized the issues at all. Um, and I will tell you, I'm coming from to this conclusion because I read in the very recent past two novels which were also farce by a very celebrated Caribbean writer. And I thought that writer trivialized the issues. She was writing about very important issues. And I thought she was disrespectful. I thought she didn't even like her characters. Um, she treated some really serious issues as if, kind of off the cuff, not a big deal. So when I read Andie Davis, and this was also farce, and I saw the respect that Andie Davis had for her characters because she treated every character, I think, very respectfully. Um, I could not help comparing the two by the other author with this one, where I thought the approach was extremely respectful. And another another Caribbean writer, well, he's no longer with us, Anthony Winkler, who writes
I
farce.
was just gonna say maybe
Yeah,
he's the other one.
this novel reminds me a lot of Anthony Winkler's playfulness, but it was much more sensitive. I mean, Anthony Winkler, nobody would accuse him of being sensitive. And I thought that Andie Davis was she treated her characters and her issues very sensitively. No, I shouldn't say Anthony Winkler doesn't treat issues sensitively. He does. But his characters are very often not. He doesn't treat them sensitively.
Also, I think we should really think about how would you approach such a number of different characters engaged in such a number of different ways, and having these kind of interactions. To do it seriously, I can't imagine it being, well, let me not say that, but I think satire was a great way to approach the topic, right? I think it actually helped you kind of really see, as Francine says, the absurdity of some of these things, right? The injustice is really, really clear when it's a big fat joke, right? This has to be a joke. And, you know, when things are really difficult for us, we do say, is this a joke? Is this a joke? And so she's taken this novel and said, make a joke, you know, here's a joke for you, here's a joke for you. All right. So I think actually satire was exactly the right vehicle to tell this story.
And I mean, I suppose I can't complain because our last maybe 10 books we've been asking for something light, and this was light. I mean, it treated with very serious issues. But if you look at it from, and I looked at it from the perspective of sort of embarrassing Sabri to an extent, um, and the way she came with her savior complex, it was very light reading. When we're accustomed to some very dark things in Caribbean books, I mean, this was very dark. It's written in the period of emancipation, cadumment in Barbados, etc. So there was also another side that I saw to that, given that it's also well, Culturama in Nevis, which is our version of Carnival, which celebrates the emancipation holiday. I saw it as a sort of folklore, because a lot of our folklore acts sort of make fun of people like that. So for example, our cakewalk dance makes fun of the plantation owners when they were dancing. So I saw that aspect as well in terms of Andie Davis making fun of people in society who have a sort of superiority complex, think that they're saviors. So I did see that. Um, but initially, I must admit to our viewers that I thought that it did trivialize it at first. But, you know, these discussions always help with that, because in reading it, I was like, is this the appropriate device to telling this story? But it does kind of make sense now. So maybe we could turn to a bit more of the spicy stuff in the novel. How could Lisette not have known that she could not just turn up at Damien's house? Paul is shaking her head.
I just could not understand how that girl could be so clueless. She's Bajan. She knows her society. I don't know how she thought she could have just driven up to the Gibbons house and press the intercom and expected to be let in and greeted warmly. I mean, that is some serious self deception.
But I think, given her position in Bajan society, self-deception is natural, right? She comes from privilege. You know, she's gone to the best schools. She's got a job that she earned. Her parents didn't get her this job. She believes in her heart somewhere deep down, right? She has, Beijing, she's living her best life. She's got the polo matches she's going to. She's dating a Gibbons, which no black person's ever been able to do. You know, and it's 2024, right? Like, it's not like the old days, right? And I do the head shake as if, and she's, I think she's, I can understand it completely why she thought things were different, because she is dating this guy and he doesn't have a side woman. Like, he's her main. They'll get married and have children. Like, times have changed. So of course she would expect to be treated like any other daughter-in-law to be. That's the world that she lives in, right? And so I'm not surprised at all, right? A little bit of self-deception. She's in the same way that she thinks other things are not happening. She thinks the world that she lives in isn't the world that she actually lives in. Sorry for her, she found out the hard way.
Yeah, I agree with Kasua. Like the way that she was raised, the upwardly mobile thing, the circles that they moved in. I mean, as she was on the way, I was thinking just you're ridiculous because you obviously don't know what's gonna happen when you get there. I mean, it was obvious to me, but for her, yeah, because she was like completely unaware of like everything, you know. Just yeah, so I'm not surprised that she thought that it would be okay.
I think Andie Davis was also making a very strong point there because to qualify her privilege, she had black privilege in a post-colonial society. And I don't recall Andie Davis naming the school, but she did mention it was a prestige school. And for those of us who are quite familiar with Barbados, those going to one of those schools, carries so much social capital. You think you've immediately made it. And so I could understand why Andie Davis was sort of poking fun at this, and given the times in which this novel was written as well, the government of Barbados is trying to eliminate that whole concept of prestige school, etc. So I think she was pointing to a deeper societal issue where Black Bajans, Black Caribbean folks, might think you've been well educated, you come from a Black privileged family, but there's always someone out there who would show you that you're not it. Unfortunately, especially in the Caribbean. And it's just a legacy of colonialism. And it might not necessarily be a white person like Damien. It could be somebody else who's just risen a rung above you on the ladder and think
Could
that they're
also be
white.
a light colored Caribbean person, a
Yes,
light colored
definitely.
black person, because that was one of the brilliant jokes in this novel. The melanometer. That's she starts off the novel by telling us about the melanometer, and we all know how the melanometer works. We all know. So yeah.
Definitely. I think this would be a good time for us to take a short break to have the reading by Andie Davis, and then we'll come back. We'll pick up the discussion. Stay tuned.
Hi, my name is Andie Davis. I'm the author of Let Me Liberate You. And today I'm going to read a passage from the book. This concerns a very important encounter between Sabri Cumberbatch, our protagonist who wants to do the liberating, and Isilda Devonish, the housekeeper who doesn't agree that she needs to be liberated. Isilda met Sabri in the foyer at the foot of the stairs. So you reach back. Isilda, are you okay? Why are you trying to complicate my life? Isilda, don't Isilda me. If you make me lose this job, I go, oh my God, did Auntie Aggie say something to you? Not yet, but it come in, mark it. Sabri sank down on the lowest step. Well, she's already throwing me out. What? Isilda buckled against the wall. Are you as blood? Oh, Lord, a week. Honestly, it's kind of an overreaction, said Sabri, shaking her head. It's not like we called her by name. That woman don't play. You ain't know this call she the terror. The terror? Sabri looked up at her. So did you know those women at the party? The ones she didn't pay? Who? No. Still. Sabri rested her head in her hand, massaging her scalp. I mean, yes, she is my aunt and everything, and I adore her, but somebody has to stand up for what's right. Wrong is wrong, you know? That is what you risking my job for? Them girls must be done make back that money 10 times since. Risking your job? Sabri looked up. Isilda, I'm trying to save you, to inspire you and people like you and those workers who are being oppressed. Don't you get that? It's time for you to start making your footsteps heard, Isilda. What are you talking about at all? Isilda felt her nerves peak. A right to make noise when you walk. Don't you deserve that? I know you agree with me, Isilda. If only you felt free to express it. Agree with what? Isilda scowled. Jesus, piece the girl gone mad. I saw the look on your face that night when Auntie Aggie was going off on those women. Did you listen to Open Mic? Did you hear how many people called in today? It was amazing. So you see, she's not the only terror. People are being oppressed all over this country. What for do life rough? Isilda snorted. I get unfair enough times too. That's why making sure I ain't gotta go hunting for work again. Ah, so that's it. I got mine, so too bad for everybody else, Sabri asked, leaning forward. That's such a New York attitude. What if I'd done that? I could have, you know. I could have stayed on that crazy New York ride, being a good blimp, swallowing hot air every day, just floating above it all like a mascot at the Macy's parade. But you know what, Isilda? It leaves you empty inside. In here. She brought a fist to her chest. Trust me, you don't want to go down that road. Being here, being real, helping people like you. Yeah, this is what it's all about, sis. Isilda stared at this grasshopper of a girl, with her twinkly face and her hands balled up under her chin, who had probably never had to bear anything heavier than that coconut head. Wearing a flour sack and all, father in heaven, the very kind of thing she was working her fingers to the quick to keep from going back to. She thought of Ma and her 6-year-old granddaughter Nikisha and of her no good son Lamar. See, Isilda, I'm here to help you find your voice, Sabri was saying. To fight for your right to sit at that beautiful table over there. Because I know you deserve it. But do you know? She leaned in and cocked her chin at Isilda like a pistol. Let me help you claim it. Let me liberate you, Isilda. Liberate me? Something in the way Sabri pronounced her name, in the slip of her American accent, spiked Isilda's blood pressure. She took a step forward. Listen to me, she said. Please to just make sure, Miss Toppin, no, I ain't had nothing to do with this nonsense here. I ain't complaining. I ain't talking out nobody business by your radio. I ain't wanting to liberating. I ain't want to sit at the table and keep the noise. I here to work and keep peace. Understand? Make sure you get that in she head, or not, I gonna put some blows in yours.
All right. Thank you very much. Welcome back. So we could continue with Lizette by asking why wasn't Lizette triggered by Damien calling her, and I quote, my miserable monkey girl? I think we could go back to to what we were answering before in terms of she was raised in black privilege, and when you're raised in privilege you become blind to certain things, you become accepting of certain things. um I know some people, for example, and I was having this discussion with my friends maybe 2 weeks ago, where they hang out with a particular set of people socially and they become blind to a lot of the challenges that their original social class would face. And I think perhaps that's what happened in Lizette's case. She just became blind or ignorant of certain things. So she just wasn't triggered by her being called a monkey.
Yeah, I guess it was the same reason that he wasn't that she thought she could turn up at his house, right? She thinks it's a different world, this is a different time. And the way that she feels like she's prejudice isn't applied to her, right? It's not the world that she lives in. You know, there are those black people that let white people say things that are normally offensive in their presence. You know, like it's
There
not
are
me.
also a lot of black people who don't even know that things like that are offensive. So,
Monkey
as
in this day and age, if all
no,
those people
trust
throwing
these
bananas at football players,
people like Lizette, think about it. People like Lizette, she probably would that didn't have any idea of that.
Lizette with her like I'm okay, everything's all right with me is following the European football leagues like everybody else with her white boyfriend, and she's seeing them getting pelted with bananas. Those black players, she sees it the same way everybody else
But
is. Like
then
she's not that cut off.
she should have reacted then. The fact that she didn't react to me says that she's unaware of this type of thing.
And
No, I don't think it's that. I think it's more that she's like he doesn't mean it like that. I think it's more
Uh,
that.
and he did use it as a term of endearment. So he is insensitive and she is clueless.
Right.
I guess it's a generational divide because I wanted to give the two of them some licks.
I don't think it is generational. I think it's a class thing where, and not no, sorry, it's not a class thing. It's an individual thing. Like different people cope with racism differently, right? And so for her, there's this racist slur or racist connotation. Let's not call it a slur. A monkey's a real animal, right? It's a connotation about blackness and bestiality that we know to be racist, but she feels like you described it, Ron J. She lives in the world of black privilege. Like these things like slip off her back. It's fine. He's still with her. I think it's one of those things like those black conservatives. Do you know what I mean? Like they think that the white people around them see them differently. And so they say these things, but that doesn't apply to them. So even though he's saying it directly to her, she's still not taking it the way that another black person would take it because she thinks she's different. She's above it. She's special. It doesn't apply to her.
Yeah, now that you mention black conservatives, I can see it. They're very, very invested in the illusion of inclusion. And yeah, I guess she probably doesn't even question it, the illusion of inclusion. That's her world.
Yeah, definitely. And now that we're having this discussion for this particular question, Eric would have had a ball with this question. I could just see it. I could just see it. So, I mean, I guess we could continue with Lizette. Being careful not to give away the story. What do you make of how Lizette's story ends? I feel like we're on Lizette's case today, Paula.
Yeah, but Lizette deserves to have us on her case.
No, she doesn't. Lizette is her mother's daughter. All right. Lizette has the life that her mother was supposed to have, what wanted her to have, and fulfills the expectations that her parents had for her. I don't think she deserves all the vitriol because she's merely a product of the parents that she had and the world that they created for her to live in or to grow up in, rather.
But by the same token, isn't Aggie just a product of the world her father created? Because the way I mean, her father was you're supposed to pursue upward mobility through marriage. So Aggie is seeing Aggie was very successful. She married very successfully, but she married somebody who was black. She sees an opportunity for Lizette to go even one rung up on the ladder by marrying somebody who is white with old money. So, but I still ain't sorry for her.
But I mean, I wanted to add, especially since this is the month of emancipation and the month of independence in Jamaica as well.
And Trinidad.
And Trinidad, I think with education should come some liberation, no pun intended, right? And Lizette was well educated. And even though you're educated in a colonial, post-colonial system, neo-colonial system, whatever you want to call it, with certain levels of education, you should become aware of certain things. And Lizette was ignorant to a lot of things, even though she was well educated.
Education does not make you deep.
Right.
It just gives you some tools.
Especially the kind of education you get in the secondary schools in the Caribbean, which is all about doing well, learning things by rote and repeating it. Most of us weren't taught to think. The whole point of education is so that you can move up in the world. It has nothing, and too bad for the ones who don't get into the prestige schools and can do that, right? So I wouldn't say that her education should have necessarily led to her being more astute. I mean, I know tons of people with that education level who are just like Lizette. So it's not the education that makes a difference. I think what makes a difference is the circles you move in, the people you're exposed to, and your willingness to actually think differently, which we can honestly say Lizette and reading. And I think we can all agree that Lizette meets none of those criteria. So not not really surprising to me at all. I know people like her, so
And in terms of how her story ends, what do you make of that?
I think everybody had a happily ever after ending, and in Lizette's world, that is how she would perceive her happily ever after. I didn't In my world, that's a tragic ending. But I'm not living Lizette's life, you know, and Lizette is entitled to pursue happiness as she conceives it. So let me keep my judgmental self to myself and stop talking.
No, I think that's exactly the point of the novel, though, right? People have agency, right? They choose their own destinies, and the destiny that she got was one that she would have chosen for herself. So it's all worked out well for her.
Yeah, I mean, she was never interested in helping anyone but herself. Like she, so yeah, that definitely tracks for her for sure.
All right. So recently, Shonda Rhimes' Bridgerton was accused of gratuitously developing a queer character. Without revealing who the queer character in this novel is, who do you believe the revelation of their queerness, or do you believe, sorry, the revelation of their queerness was gratuitous?
I don't think it was gratuitous. I think, first of all, the queer people are people. There are queer people in every society. And Barbados has this interesting history. Even back in the day when I was in school in Barbados, the queer Bajans got the kind of pass that no, you couldn't get anywhere else in the Caribbean. The level of tolerance for queer people in Barbados was, yeah, unusual by Caribbean standards. So I think it's just appropriate, given the kind of society, given how acceptable Bajan society is of queerness, and just given the fact that queer people are part of the population. Um, I have a problem with people saying that queer characters are gratuitous. What they don't exist. So
I definitely agree there. I mean, it's 2024, and I know there's been a whole raging debate online by homophobes in particular about queer characters appearing in films. But I mean, they're humans, as you mentioned, just like us, and they exist. So you don't necessarily have to deny their existence. So I definitely agree that it wasn't gratuitous in this instance, and actually didn't particularly find it shocking when it was introduced. It was just continue reading.
Yeah, I know.
That's the
I was like,
story.
oh, okay, yeah, okay, cool. That makes sense actually.
yeah,
Yeah, and that was
she
it.
set it up for us to
Yeah.
say eventually, oh yeah,
Oh,
that's
oh
why.
yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, and you know,
I think one nice thing about that particular queer character is they're still anchored in the community, right? There's no sense of them being foreign, outsider, watching too much American TV. You know, they're just living their best Bajan life, fighting for their best Bajan struggles, and are very much a part of the community in all the ways we think. It didn't feel gratuitous, and I wonder what it means to have a gratuitous queer character. Is it like having a gratuitous black character? You know, one more than feels natural or necessary. Like what?
but I feel like that's a thing now, like Royal J says, like whenever any queer character is in any movie or TV show, especially if it's an adaptation of a book where in the book there was no queerness, but now in the adaptation, like Sandra Rhimes has done in Bridgerton, the character is queer, like there's this whole outcry about it. And I think that's for me, people would say it's gratuitous because they're unhappy with the fact that there's a queer character, but it's not gratuitous at all because
And
queer,
quite
as
frankly,
Paula said, queer people exist.
I celebrate Shonda for making that choice, because this nonsense of pretending that queerness is something that just happened yesterday, it just blows my mind. I can't believe people are so willing to be happily stupid.
I wonder if there's anything in it like should straight people write queer characters, and if we do it badly, then it looks gratuitous, right? I wonder if that's part. But if not, then yeah, I'm with Paula. Um,
I mean, maybe I know that Ingrid Prasad got some pushback as well in Love After Love because she was a straight person writing queer characters. But I mean, queer characters exist if you actually know people who are queer. I don't see why you shouldn't write about them as long as you do it. It's written well, you know.
It comes back to that old classic write what you know thing, doesn't it? And I'm not personally a believer in it. Actually, I think that like that kind of CIA logic that like that makes people. I think it reduces empathy. I think people should try to write what they don't know because that expands all of our human experiences.
But even as a straight, if you're a straight writer writing straight characters, you don't know everything either. So you can't possibly write about everything that straight people do. So yeah, that argument holds no weight for me. I want to speak about well, several characters who we've not mentioned so far. So Hubert da Costa, who is a judge, is shallow and narcissistic. Sabri, who believes she's called to be the savior of the people, is clueless and narcissistic. And the trade unionists Jessica Payne and Ophelia Walcott are opportunists. Is the novel cynical?
It's satirical, right? But I'm going to say one thing. I've talked a lot, so I'm going to say one thing. I think we do. I don't think Sabri is what's the word what you used? I don't think she has a savior complex at all. I think she's an insecure artiste who's found a way to get away from dealing with her crap. I think she genuinely wants to do good in the world, which is not the same as wanting to save it because you believe you're destined to do so, right? And she hasn't found an avenue to do that constructively and helpfully and with good politics, should we say, right? And so she's on the spot. Because remember how the story starts, without giving too much away. She doesn't plan to save anybody, you know. She kind of just has a change. She's kind of offended that people are going to put her back into the box she tried to escape from in New York of being this kind of shallow, trendy artist, and she wants to do something more meaningful, right? And that kind of, in all fairness to her, just goes viral. You know, that she picks up on something that she sees as kind of, this seems a bit of a problem, and it blows way out. It goes way beyond what she ever expected, planned, thought, imagined, and then she follows it through because it gives her a sense of purpose. That is not a crime, and that doesn't give you a savior complex, right? And she does genuinely care about something. Oh, Francie's making a face. She does genuinely care about Isilda, for example, right? And she does genuinely want to do right by people that she thinks have been wronged. Again, not a savior complex. I think there are people that have white savior complexes or just general savior complexes. She does stuff that's messed up. She does stuff that's ill-informed. She does stuff that's stupid. But I don't think I'd put a savior complex on her. I'd say she's just inexperienced at organizing, and that's not a crime. That's just inexperience. And
Nah, I disagree with you. She had major savior complex going on. Like just the way she would talk to people, the way that she would like, just her whole approach. I agree. She fell into it. And but then instead of like trying to pull back and see how she could see, well, first of all, is there actually a problem? Or do people actually feel oppressed? No, she did not try to find that out. She was like, "Oh my God, all these people are oppressed. I'm going to save them, and not only, and I'm not just going to save the ones who might actually think they're oppressed. I'm going to find the ones who are perfectly happy and tell them they're oppressed and they need to do something about it. If that's not a savior complex, I don't
that's
know what
true.
is."
Yeah, that's true. So there's a bit of savior complex in there. I'll give you that. There's some, but I think it's
Not a bit, Kessler, plenty.
you know what it is. I've seen so many cynical, how to say this nicely, middle class white women who are calculating with their savior complex that I had a bit of sympathy for her because I can see that she's not like that. It's kind of, there's some well-intentioned goodness in there that is just kind of gone awry and is messy and awkward to watch. But you're right. There is the scene where she's given the UN report is hilarious. Um, and I think it's what we point to where she's trying to find people that need saving. They're like, but I standing up sometimes. Does that make me, like
This novel was made for people like you, Miss Kessler, to make you examine what constitutes allyship. Where are your limits? What are you allowed to do as an ally? Allies must not think that they are the generals of the army. You are the foot soldiers. The people who are affected are the ones who must strategize because they are the ones who live with these burdens. They are the ones with something to lose. Allies must know their place. Stay in the back and supply the elite fighters with water. That's your job.
So where does Jessica compare to? Because I think it's easy to point out Sabri because she's foreign, right? But Jessica's not foreign.
I mean, based on like contemporary issues in terms of like trade unionists, I think she was pointing to that because Barbados has, in the last maybe 10 years, they've had quite a few issues with trade unionists who are just in it for the job. And I think all across the Caribbean, trade unions are no longer what they used to be. They're just people
But
collecting
all right, let me
salaries.
speak as a Jamaican. Trade unions were always opportunistic. We have a trade union called the Bustamante Industrial Tribunal. What does that mean? Buster started a trade union because he needed followers. That was to create his political career.
But that's unique to that. But that's very unique to Jamaica. Like lots.
No, it's a thing all
No. In
across
terms
the
of literally the Bustamante kind of what's it called? That kind of what iconoclasm? What's it called? That word. I'm sorry for someone that likes.
But I mean, Bustamante was probably bold enough to like put his name to it. But in Barbados, in St. Kitts and Nevis, in Trinidad and Tobago, trade unionists use trade unions to launch political careers. That's literally what it is.
Hang on. Let's not misread history, right? Let's not misread history. Now, I'm not disputing that there are some really dodgy characters in trade unions and who lead trade unions and who use them as a form of power base, right? For their own personal careers, and they launch careers from there. Not saying that, but we know that from Caribbean history. We know there's a whole generation of trade unionists who go on to become statesmen in the independent Caribbean, right? We know that about our history. So let's not. I'm not in denial about that. But that's not to say that there aren't some brilliant trade union leaders who are there for the reasons that people form and set up and run trade unions, right? Is to
But
improve
we're
the lives
not
of
saying
workers.
no, Kesawa, but we're saying opportunism.
But opportunism exists in all fields.
Trade unionism in the Caribbean.
But opportunism also exists in religion, concept. I feel like we shouldn't. I would hate for us to give the impression that trade unionism is blighted in ways that in the Caribbean than it is in other places. I think that's
I just corrected myself, Kesawa.
Yeah.
I just corrected myself. I suspect it happens everywhere in the world. But for us, I don't think we should willfully blind ourselves to what we know is true. That opportunism is a serious issue within trade unionism.
But I think that happens anytime you've got people in leadership that's slightly unchecked and slightly not unelected. That's not the word I mean. But you know, whenever charisma is important.
Right,
So,
but Andie Davis chose to point that out as it applies to trade unions in her book, right? So I think the character when we look at Jessica and what was the other one's name? I don't remember.
Ophelia
Yeah,
Walker.
they were definitely opportunistic. There's no doubt about it.
And trade unions in the Caribbean has that unique history. Sorry to cut you off, Francine. It has that unique history where trade unions are formalized to kind of reduce the radical possibilities of labor movement, right? So there's a kind of a particular thing about the Caribbean that I'll say at the same time charisma is important, and so we'll always allow for opportunities. I just wanted to flag that.
Unfortunately, though, we're out of time. We've had a spirited discussion, as we always do, and then we end up running out of time. But for our viewers, this is not the end of us speaking about this novel, because the next time you see us, we'll be interviewing Andie Davis, who'll tell us a lot more about her novel and her writing process. Until then, thank you for joining us and see you next time.